A white officer takes the stand and delivers a damning accusation, claiming a black woman resisted arrest and assaulted him. He's confident, unaware that the woman he's accusing is a highly trained Navy SEAL. "You misjudged me, Officer Simmons," she would say. And soon, the truth would begin to crack through the surface. What kind of revelation can bring an entire courtroom to silence? This is the unraveling of a lie, where justice becomes not just a verdict, but a reckoning. Thank you for being with us. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on the next meaningful stories. We have another impactful story coming your way tomorrow. Morning light streamed weakly through thick courtroom curtains, casting stretched shadows over the polished floorboards. Despite its elegant architecture, the space felt suffocating. Wooden benches were packed with locals, reporters scribbling hurried notes, and silent observers bracing for drama. In the midst of them sat Monica Jackson. Her exterior was calm, betraying nothing. Under the artificial glow, her rich skin shone faintly, her braids neatly resting against her shoulders. She sat with grace, upright, back straight as though held by invisible tension. Her fingers loosely interlocked on her lap. Dressed in a plain white blouse and black trousers, her attire projected humility and poise. But her gaze told another story, sharp and observant, sweeping over every person and movement in the room. To the casual onlooker, she appeared no different than any other accused. But for those who truly looked, there was something different, an air of focus and resolve that didn't fit the usual profile. The bailiff called the court to order. All eyes shifted forward as Judge Howard Grayson entered. With his graying hair and lined face, he exuded authority dimmed by years of weary trials. Yet this particular case sparked a flicker in his eye. Maybe it was Officer Simmons, exuding smug certainty at the plaintiff's table, or perhaps the local buzz that preceded the hearing. "The state of California versus Monica Jackson," the bailiff declared. His voice echoed through the vaulted chamber. Monica stood. Her movements were slow and composed as she turned to face the bench. A wave of whispers rose as people craned for a clearer look. Officer Simmons leaned back, confidence etched into his smirk. His uniform was immaculate. The years had taught him arrogance, and this courtroom was familiar ground. Her lawyer, Benjamin Carter, young, black, and fresh from law school, flipped through his documents, visibly tense. He stole a glance at Monica, seeking reassurance, but she didn't return it. Her gaze remained locked on the bench, her face unreadable. With effort, Carter straightened. "We're ready to proceed, Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying an edge of hesitation. The judge nodded toward Simmons. "Officer Simmons, please approach." Simmons rose with exaggerated flair, each step calculated like a performance. He adjusted his collar, walked slowly to the stand, and sent Monica a fleeting glance, his smirk barely visible but undeniable. As he took the oath, Monica observed. She noticed the twitch in his fingers, the subtle unease in his posture. Trained eyes like hers missed nothing, but she sat motionless as the officer began. "On that evening," he started, loud and clear, "I was dispatched to a reported disturbance on the east side. There, I found Ms. Jackson outside a shuttered business." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Loitering was a term often used loosely, especially when applied to people of color. Simmons kept going, unaffected. "When I questioned her presence, she became aggressive," he stated, now adopting a more dramatic tone. "She wouldn't identify herself, raised her voice. I tried to calm things down, but she assaulted me." Gasps swept through the gallery. Monica didn't blink. Simmons shifted in his chair, pretending discomfort. "She struck me in the chest and reached for my weapon. I had to act. I restrained her immediately." From the back of the room, someone whispered, "That doesn't sound right." Heads turned. The judge struck his gavel softly. "Thank you, Officer Simmons," said Judge Grayson, voice level. "You may step down." Benjamin Carter stood. "Your Honor, before we continue, I'd like to—" "Hold it for cross-examination, Mr. Carter," the judge cut in. "Let's keep things moving." Monica released a slow breath. The pressure was mounting, but she remained poised. Leaning slightly toward Carter, she murmured, "Stay sharp. Stick to the truth." Carter nodded, though anxiety lingered on his face. With the prosecution done, the atmosphere grew denser. Simmons sat back down, now grinning widely. He glanced toward the officers in the back row and subtly winked. Monica noticed. "Ms. Jackson," the judge said, with a touch of doubt in his voice, "you may take the stand." She stood, smoothing her blouse, and walked calmly to the witness chair. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom as she sat. Dozens of eyes bore down on her. She adjusted the mic deliberately. "Ms. Jackson," the prosecutor began, middle-aged, sharp-suited, and sharper-tongued, "please explain what happened that night." Monica leaned in slightly, voice steady. "I will. But first, let me clarify something. The officer's version isn't just incorrect. It was purposefully misleading." A collective gasp filled the air. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Strong words, Ms. Jackson. Any evidence?" She locked eyes with him. The truth has a way of surfacing. He opened his mouth to argue, but something in her composure made him hesitate. The judge gave a subtle nod, and questioning resumed. As Monica spoke, the courtroom leaned in. This wasn't just another defendant. There was gravity in her every word. And though no one knew it yet, Simmons's story was already starting to fracture. She took a brief pause, her hands resting on the wooden edge of the stand. The silence was nearly suffocating. "My account," she began, "starts with me leaving a friend's house. I stopped near Magnolia and Fifth to check directions on my phone." She let the words settle. That's when Officer Simmons approached. The prosecutor leaned forward. "So this was entirely unprovoked?" She tilted her head. "Not exactly. I was on a sidewalk, not trespassing, not blocking traffic." He shined a flashlight in my face and asked what I was doing, in a tone I'd hardly call polite. "And you responded?" he asked. "I told him I was checking my phone," she said evenly. "He asked for ID. I asked if I had done anything wrong." The prosecutor pounced. "So you questioned his authority?" "No," she said calmly. "I questioned his intent. I wasn't breaking any law. I simply asked why he wanted my identification." The room stirred. Judge Grayson tapped his gavel again. He raised his voice. Monica continued, still composed. "Said I was being uncooperative. I tried to explain I meant no trouble. But before I could finish, he grabbed my arm." The words landed with force. The prosecutor tried to control the narrative. "So you're saying he restrained you without cause?" "Yes," she confirmed. "And when I asked him to release me, he gripped tighter. He told me, and I quote, 'Women like you need to learn to obey.'" Gasps burst from the gallery. The judge struck his gavel harder this time. "Miss Jackson," the prosecutor said through clenched teeth, "that's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" She turned to him with piercing clarity. "No, because the body cam he wore that night mysteriously malfunctioned. Isn't that correct, Officer Simmons?" All eyes turned. Simmons shifted, his smirk gone, jaw tight. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Let's stay with the facts. After the restraint, what happened?" Monica sat straighter. "I told him not to touch me and asked him to let go. He refused. When I pulled away, he slammed me against the car." The courtroom stirred again. Shock, disbelief, outrage simmered through the rows. Even the judge looked slightly shaken. "And then?" the prosecutor asked, more subdued now. "He cuffed me," she said. "Said I was under arrest for assault." "Isn't it possible," the prosecutor tried, "that your physical strength made him feel threatened?" "I'm not stronger than a trained officer," she replied. "And I didn't resist until my rights were violated." Before he could cut in, she added, "And I never reached for his weapon." That was a lie, created to excuse his actions. The room froze. Simmons shifted once more, clearly uncomfortable. "You're expecting us to believe," the prosecutor said tightly, "that Officer Simmons fabricated the entire event?" Monica gave a small, assured smile. "Counselor, the truth always reveals itself. You'll see. Soon enough," Monica said calmly. The judge leaned forward slightly, peering over his glasses. "Miss Jackson, are you suggesting there is evidence this court has not yet reviewed?" Before she could respond, Benjamin Carter quickly stood. "Your Honor, We plan to submit further documentation during the proceedings. The prosecutor scoffed. More delay tactics, Your Honor. If the defense had anything credible, it would already be part of the record. Monica turned to the bench. The truth doesn't always arrive on time, Your Honor. But when it does, it will be impossible to deny. Judge Grayson studied her with a look that revealed nothing. After a beat, he gave a curt nod. Very well. We'll adjourn for the day. Court will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. As his gavel struck, quiet murmurs swelled into a chorus of whispers. Monica stepped down from the witness box with unshaken poise, passing Officer Simmons, who now avoided eye contact, and returned to her seat beside Carter. Are you absolutely sure about this? Carter whispered, doubt in his voice. Monica placed a hand on his forearm, firm and grounding. Trust me, Ben. Tomorrow, the truth will speak louder than anything Simmons could fabricate. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long golden beams across the quiet town. Monica paused at the top of the courthouse steps, letting her eyes wander toward the horizon. The battle ahead loomed, but she was steady. She had been through worse. The courthouse slowly emptied, tension hanging in the air like mist. Monica lingered at the edge of the steps, framed against the deep orange sky. The murmuring crowd faded into background noise as she tuned into her own thoughts. This wasn't the first time she'd had a fight to be seen. Carter approached, briefcase in hand, tension carved across his face. He hesitated as he joined her. Monica, he said lowly, careful not to draw attention. We need to talk. She didn't look at him, but her voice was steady. What is it, Ben? He exhaled, breath visible in the cooling air. You're holding back. The judge sees it. The prosecutor sees it. And Simmons? He's getting jittery. If you have something that could change the tide, I need to know. Monica turned, offering the smallest smile. You'll find out soon. That's not good enough, he said firmly. I'm your lawyer. If there's a bombshell coming, I need to be ready. She studied him a moment, then gave a slight nod. Come to my place tonight. I'll tell you everything. He blinked in surprise. Really? Really? She replied. But not here. That evening, Carter arrived at Monica's modest home on the town's edge, flanked by towering oaks swaying gently in the breeze. A soft porch light glowed, casting long shadows over the gravel path. He knocked gently, and Monica opened the door almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting. She wore a navy sweatshirt and black leggings, her hair pulled back, her demeanor relaxed but focused. Come in, she said simply. He stepped inside, glancing around the neatly kept living room. Personal touches dotted the space. A photo of Monica in uniform with an older man, both smiling in navy dress blues. A folded flag encased in glass. Shelves lined with books on leadership and military strategy. You live alone? He asked, more out of curiosity than anything. For now, she replied, motioning to the couch. Want something to drink? I'm good, he said, sitting with his briefcase at his feet. I'm here for the truth. No distractions. She gave a faint nod, appreciating his resolve. Fair enough. She walked to the bookshelf, pulling out a worn leather folder, its edges frayed from use. She placed it on the coffee table between them and took a seat across from him. What is it? He asked. My service record, she said. Everything you need to know. He stared. You're just handing this over? You're defending me, she said. You deserve to know who I am. He opened the folder, eyes widening as he read. Discharge documents. Commendations. Specialized training. He flipped through faster. You were a SEAL, he whispered. She answered for him. Lieutenant Commander. Retired. He stared at her in disbelief. Monica, this changes everything. Why didn't you say something before? Because it's not about who I was, she said, leaning in. It's about what this case represents. Simmons is part of something bigger, something broken. This isn't just my fight. Carter rubbed his forehead, overwhelmed. When this gets out, the prosecution will lose their mind. And Simmons. He won't collapse, she said darkly. Men like him double down. That's why we have to be smart. He nodded, beginning to understand. Do you think he suspects? Not yet, she said. But he knows there's something he's missing. That's what's rattling him. He closed the folder. So what's our move? Monica stood, walking over to the mantel where she picked up the folded flag. Holding it with care, she turned back. Tomorrow, we don't just dismantle Simmons. We expose the system that allowed this to happen. And how, he asked. She looked at him, her voice a quiet flame. We make them see me for who I am, a woman who gave 2 decades to defend the freedoms that man tried to strip from me. Carter felt a shiver, not of fear, but from the sheer strength radiating from her. Tomorrow's going to be a fight, he murmured. I've been fighting my whole life, she said. Tomorrow's just another battle. The next morning, the courthouse loomed beneath a steel-gray sky. A crowd gathered, buzzing with anticipation. Word of the trial had spread fast. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with nervous energy. Monica sat at the defense table, her crisp navy blazer and white shirt commanding respect. Even before the judge arrived, the room had fallen into an uneasy silence. Beside her, Carter reviewed his notes, tapping his pen. You ready? He asked under his breath. I've been ready for years, she replied. The gavel struck. Court is now in session, Judge Grayson announced. We will resume proceedings in the case of State versus Monica Jackson. The prosecutor, sharp and calculating, rose. Your Honor, today we will bolster Officer Simmons's testimony and submit additional proof of the defendant's conduct. Monica remained still, composed as ever. Simmons was called again. He adjusted his tie as he walked to the stand, his steps slower this time, his confidence faltering under the room's gaze. Officer Simmons, the prosecutor began, please reiterate the circumstances of Ms. Jackson's arrest. Clearing his throat, Simmons replied with less certainty. As I previously said, she was loitering near a closed shop, became confrontational, and struck me while I was questioning her. And you maintain this version of events? The prosecutor asked. I do, Simmons said, glancing briefly at Monica. Thank you. No further questions. Carter rose, his movements measured. Officer Simmons, he began, you stated my client was aggressive and reached for your firearm. Correct. That's correct, Simmons replied, rigid. And you also claimed your body cam failed during the incident, Carter said, tone neutral. Yes. Malfunctions happen, Simmons said, jaw clenched. Certainly, Carter agreed. You've been on the force a decade. How many times has that happened during an arrest? Simmons hesitated. Rarely, but this was one of those times. Carter paused, then asked, and is it also a coincidence that a bystander recorded part of the incident? The courtroom stirred. The judge struck his gavel. Do you have evidence, Mr. Carter? Carter nodded and held up a USB stick. We submit this footage, recorded by a witness on scene. The prosecutor objected, but the judge shut him down. Let's see it. The screen came to life. The video was grainy, recorded through a car window, but the audio rang clear. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Simmons's voice barked. I'm not resisting. Monica's calm reply rang out. Let go of my arm. Then the push. The words, women like you don't get to question me. Chaos broke out. The judge called for order. During recess, Carter paced, adrenaline pumping. This changes everything, he said to Monica. She folded her hands calmly. It's a start. But one crack doesn't bring the whole wall down. What's next? We control the pace, she said. We don't just break Simmons. We expose the entire system. The bailiff's voice called them back. Monica rose. As she approached the stand again, the courtroom leaned in. Simmons sat rigid, his mask cracking. The officers behind him looked unsure. Ms. Jackson, Carter said, you've heard the charges, resisting, assaulting, reaching for a weapon. Are they true? No, Monica said clearly. Then tell us what really happened. She took a breath, gaze steady. That night, I was heading home. I stopped to check my phone. That's when Officer Simmons approached. Her jaw tightened, and so the real story began. Monica's voice was unwavering. He accused me of being uncooperative. When I tried to explain myself, he grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go, even after I told him I hadn't done anything wrong. Benjamin moved closer to the jury, his voice gaining strength. Did you threaten him in any way? No, Monica answered firmly. I simply told him to let go. When I tried to pull away, he shoved me against a patrol car and handcuffed me. Then he falsely claimed I reached for his weapon. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. But Monica wasn't finished. His actions weren't about law enforcement, she continued, her voice controlled but charged with emotion. They were about control, about asserting power over someone he assumed wouldn't fight back. Benjamin paused, letting her words sink in. Then he addressed the court. Miss Jackson, there's been a lot of speculation about your background. The prosecution has painted you as an ordinary civilian who suddenly turned violent. Is there more to your story that the court should know? Monica's gaze met Benjamin's. For the first time, her calm exterior slipped to reveal something deeper: resolve, strength, and a touch of anger. Yes, she said, her voice resonating with decades of experience. There is more. The room held its breath as Monica leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on the stand. I am Lieutenant Commander Monica Jackson, retired Navy SEAL, she declared, her voice cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. I served my country for 20 years, including in some of the most dangerous combat zones in the world. I've led teams on missions that demanded discipline, precision, and strength, qualities that I carry with me every day. Gasps filled the room, followed by stunned silence. Even Judge Grayson seemed momentarily taken aback, his gavel frozen midair. Officer Simmons's face drained of color, his jaw tightening in an attempt to contain his reaction. Benjamin moved forward, his voice rising. Miss Jackson, as a Navy SEAL, you've been trained to handle high-pressure situations. Did you apply any of that training during your encounter with Officer Simmons? Yes, Monica answered without hesitation. I use it to stay calm, to de-escalate the situation, and to protect myself from harm without resorting to violence. And did you at any point attempt to harm Officer Simmons or reach for his weapon? Benjamin pressed. No, Monica replied firmly. My training taught me how to assess threats and respond appropriately. Officer Simmons wasn't a threat to my safety. He was a threat to my dignity, and I refused to let him strip me of that. The courtroom erupted again, louder this time, as the weight of her words settled on the room. Judge Grayson banged his gavel, demanding order. Order in this court, he shouted. Once the noise subsided, Benjamin turned to the jury. His voice was steady, yet filled with conviction. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard Officer Simmons's version of events, and now you've heard the truth from a woman who has spent her life defending this country. The question you need to ask yourselves is simple. Who do you believe? The prosecutor remained seated, his face pale, eyes fixed on the table in front of him. Simmons, sitting across from him, stared straight ahead, his hands clenched tightly on the arms of his chair. Monica stepped down from the stand, her head held high. She returned to her seat, her presence commanding the room. As she sat, she leaned toward Benjamin and whispered softly, "Let's see how long that wall holds." The courtroom was almost suffocating with tension. Officer Bradley Simmons sat at the plaintiff's table, his earlier composure shattered. A faint tremor ran through his hands as he gripped the table. His fellow officers in the back row exchanged uneasy glances, their silent support now giving way to doubt. Judge Grayson, usually stoic, glanced around the room before turning to Simmons's lawyer. "Mr. Avery," he said, his voice tinged with weariness, "does the prosecution wish to proceed with redirect, or do you need a moment to reconsider your strategy?" Richard Avery rose slowly from his seat, his usual sharp demeanor faltering. He adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture, and stepped toward the witness stand. His voice, once commanding, now held a faint edge of desperation. "Your Honor," he began, "we intend to call Officer Simmons back to the stand to clarify some inconsistencies." The judge nodded, eyes narrowing slightly. "Proceed." Simmons stood, his movements stiff as though weighed down by the scrutiny surrounding him. He walked to the witness stand, avoiding Monica's gaze. When he sat, his hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone, a subtle gesture not lost on the jury. Avery approached, forcing a smile. "Officer Simmons, you've heard the defendant's testimony and her claims about your conduct. Do you have anything to say in response?" Simmons cleared his throat, his voice shaky but determined. "Yes, her account is exaggerated. I acted within the scope of my duties." Avery nodded, encouraging him. And the video evidence presented earlier. How do you explain what the court saw? Simmons hesitated, glancing toward the jury before looking back at Avery. The video doesn't show everything, he said. It's incomplete. It doesn't capture the context of her behavior leading up to that moment. Avery pressed on. What context would that be? She was defiant, Simmons said, his voice rising. She refused to cooperate and challenge my authority. I had to act decisively to maintain order. Monica observed him, her expression almost pitying. Her hands were neatly folded on the table in front of her. Benjamin leaned toward her and whispered, "He's unraveling." She nodded slightly, but said nothing, her focus unbroken. Avery's voice grew more insistent. "So, you stand by your claim that the defendant attempted to reach for your weapon?" "Yes," Simmons said, though the word came out weaker than he intended. She made a sudden movement toward my side. I had to protect myself. Benjamin shot to his feet. "Your Honor, permission to cross-examine?" Judge Grayson nodded curtly. "Granted." Benjamin approached the stand slowly, his movements deliberate. He stopped just a few feet from Simmons, his presence looming without being overbearing. He let the silence linger for a moment, forcing Simmons to meet his gaze. "Officer Simmons," Benjamin began, his tone calm but edged with steel, "you've testified multiple times that my client reached for your weapon. Is that correct?" "Yes," Simmons replied, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "And yet," Benjamin continued, "you provided no physical evidence to support this claim. No fingerprints on your holster. No corroborating testimony. Just your word." Simmons's jaw tightened. "I know what I saw." Benjamin nodded slowly, as though considering his words. "You know what you saw, but the court has seen something else, video evidence that contradicts your account. Evidence that shows my client was calm and cooperative until you escalated the situation." "The video doesn't tell the whole story," Simmons said, his voice rising in protest. "It's taken out of context." Benjamin tilted his head slightly. "Out of context? Let's talk about context then," he said, turning to the jury. His voice grew louder as he addressed them. "This is a man who approached a law-abiding citizen, demanded her identification without cause, and when questioned, resorted to force. A man who then lied under oath to cover his actions. The prosecutor objected, but the judge overruled him, motioning for Benjamin to continue. Benjamin turned back to Simmons. His voice dropped to a cold, quiet tone. "Officer Simmons, you accused a decorated Navy SEAL, a woman who has served this country with honor, of being a threat. Tell me, does it embarrass you to know that the person you tried to intimidate has faced dangers you couldn't even begin to imagine?" Simmons flinched, his composure slipping further. "That's irrelevant," he snapped, his confidence cracking. Benjamin shot back, his voice sharp. "No, Simmons, it's not irrelevant. You weren't acting like a police officer that night. You were acting like a bully, and you thought you could get away with abusing your authority. But you didn't count on her standing up to you, did you?" The room fell silent. The weight of Benjamin's words pressed down on everyone present. Simmons opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Benjamin turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have no further questions." Simmons stepped down from the stand, his shoulders slumped as he returned to his seat. His fellow officers avoided his gaze, their earlier confidence replaced with doubt. Monica watched him for a moment before leaning toward Benjamin. "The walls are starting to crumble," she whispered. Benjamin nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Let's finish the job." The courtroom was thick with silence as Officer Bradley Simmons returned to his seat, his confident facade shattered. The air felt heavy, charged with the tension of the moment. The jury exchanged uneasy glances, their uncertainty growing. Even Judge Grayson, usually detached, leaned forward, sensing a shift he hadn't expected. At the defense table, Monica sat unmoved, her calm presence a stark contrast to Simmons's unraveling. Her quiet strength filled the room, more powerfully than words could. Benjamin flipped through his notes one last time, jaw tight with determination. This wasn't just a case to him anymore. It was a reckoning. Judge Grayson cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice cautious. The defense may proceed. Benjamin stood, buttoning his jacket. He retrieved a file from his briefcase and held it up for the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, his voice steady but firm. What you've heard in this courtroom over the past few days is a tale of two stories. Officer Simmons would have you believe that my client, a woman with no prior criminal record and a career dedicated to serving her country, suddenly became violent and aggressive for no reason. But the truth is far simpler and far more troubling. Benjamin opened the file, pulling out a series of documents. This, he said, holding up the first page, is Officer Simmons's personnel record. And what it reveals is a troubling pattern of behavior that casts doubt on his credibility, if not outright undermines it. The prosecutor shot up from his seat, voice sharp. Your Honor, I object. This has no bearing on the case at hand. Judge Grayson raised a hand to silence him. Overruled, Mr. Avery. Mr. Carter, proceed. Benjamin nodded and addressed the jury directly. Throughout his career, Officer Simmons has been the subject of numerous complaints, excessive use of force, racial bias, improper conduct. These complaints were either ignored or swept under the rug by the department. But today they are coming to light. He handed copies of the documents to the jury. The gallery murmured, and even the judge, scanning the pages, showed signs of surprise. Benjamin's voice grew firmer. Let me be clear. This isn't about a single bad decision. This is about a pattern, one that culminated in the false arrest and mistreatment of my client. He paused for effect. And now, it's time for her to tell her truth. Monica stood slowly, her movements controlled. She walked to the front of the courtroom, standing tall and commanding as she addressed the jury. My name is Lieutenant Commander Monica Jackson, she began, her voice clear and steady. For 20 years, I served in the United States Navy as a SEAL. I've been to places most people can't even imagine, faced dangers most people will never know. Through it all, I've held myself to the highest standards of integrity and discipline. Her eyes swept over the jury, each word weighted with her experience. I've faced enemies on the battlefield, but I never thought I'd face one in my own country. The room was silent now. The earlier murmurs replaced by a heavy, palpable sense of reflection. Monica continued, unwavering. That night, I wasn't a threat. I wasn't breaking any laws. I was simply existing, something that for people like me often feels like a crime in itself. The gallery was now hushed, and even the judge's gaze softened for a brief moment. Monica's voice remained steady. Officer Simmons didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a target, a means to assert power over someone he thought couldn't fight back. But what he didn't see was my strength, my resolve, my refusal to be silenced. She turned directly to face Simmons, her gaze piercing. You underestimated me, Officer Simmons. But more importantly, you underestimated the truth. And the truth has a way of coming to light. Simmons averted his gaze, his face flushing with humiliation. The jury's eyes were fixed on Monica, expressions a mix of awe and anger. Anger not at her, but at the system that had allowed this injustice. Turning back to the judge, Monica said, Your Honor, I fought for this country. I fought for justice. And I'm here today to fight, not just for myself, but for every person who has ever been wronged by those sworn to protect them. The room erupted into applause, despite Judge Grayson's gavel banging repeatedly. Order, the judge barked, though even his eyes held a glint of respect as they settled on Monica. Benjamin stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander Jackson. No further questions. As Monica returned to her seat, the courtroom's energy shifted. The jury looked at her with newfound respect. Simmons, on the other hand, seemed to shrink in his chair, his earlier bravado now a distant memory. Judge Grayson leaned forward, his voice heavy with finality. We will now move to closing arguments. I suggest both parties choose their words carefully. The courtroom fell into a taut silence as the prosecutor, Richard Avery, stood to deliver his closing argument. He adjusted his tie nervously, his usual confidence now replaced by a strained composure. Your Honor, Avery began, his voice measured but lacking its previous vigor. What we've seen here today is a complex case. While the defense has worked hard to paint Officer Simmons as a man with a questionable record, I urge you to consider the broader picture. Law enforcement officers make split-second decisions every day, often under extreme pressure. Officer Simmons believed he was acting in the best interest of public safety. He paused, briefly meeting Simmons's eyes, whose face was now a mask of unease. Mistakes may have been made, Avery admitted, but that does not change the fact that Officer Simmons was doing his job. The defense claims, while compelling, do not erase the fact that the defendant resisted arrest and escalated the situation. Avery's tone hardened. I ask you to consider the facts and not be swayed by emotion or spectacle. With that, he returned to his seat. Benjamin rose next, his movements deliberate and composed. He adjusted his jacket, straightened his tie, and approached the jury with a calm, quiet confidence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Benjamin began, his voice steady and firm, what we've seen here today is not a complex case. It's painfully simple. My client, Lieutenant Commander Monica Jackson, a decorated Navy SEAL and an American hero, was profiled, mistreated, and lied about by a man who abused his power. He gestured toward Monica, who sat with her back straight, her hands resting lightly on the table. Monica Jackson did not resist arrest. She did not threaten Officer Simmons. What she did was ask a question, a simple, reasonable question. Why? And for that, she was thrown against a car, handcuffed, and humiliated. Benjamin's voice rose, his passion filling the room. This isn't just about Monica Jackson. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that those who wear a badge and swear an oath to protect and serve are held to the highest standards of integrity. Because when they fail to do so, the entire system fails. He took a step closer to the jury, lowering his voice for emphasis. Today, you have the power to send a message that no one, no matter their position, not even an officer of the law, is above accountability. That justice is not just a word we say, but a principle we uphold. I trust you to make the right decision, Benjamin said as he returned to his seat. The courtroom was engulfed in silence as Judge Grayson gave his instructions to the jury, then dismissed them to deliberate. The hours stretched on, feeling like days. Monica sat quietly in the courthouse hallway, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Benjamin paced back and forth, brow furrowed in thought. The low hum of conversation from nearby spectators and reporters filled the air, but Monica tuned it all out. Do you think they'll see the truth? Benjamin asked, breaking the silence. Monica looked up at him, her expression calm but resolute. They don't need to see it, Ben. They need to feel it. The truth has a way of making itself known. Benjamin nodded, though his nerves were clearly evident. Before they could say anything more, the bailiff appeared in the doorway. The jury has reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed as everyone filed back in, the tension nearly unbearable. Monica stood beside Benjamin at the defense table, her face an unreadable mask. Across the room, Simmons sat stiffly, his eyes locked on the jury box. The forewoman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but a serious expression, stood as the judge addressed her. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor, she replied, her voice steady. Judge Grayson nodded. Please read the verdict. The forewoman unfolded a piece of paper and began. In the case of State versus Monica Jackson, we find the defendant not guilty on all charges. A wave of emotion rippled through the room. Gasps, murmurs, and even a few quiet cheers broke out before the judge's gavel brought order. Monica exhaled softly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. Benjamin placed a hand on her shoulder, a smile breaking through his otherwise professional demeanor. The forewoman continued. Furthermore, we the jury strongly recommend that an investigation into Officer Simmons's conduct be pursued. Judge Grayson nodded gravely. The court will take this recommendation under advisement. Officer Simmons, I suggest you retain counsel. This matter is far from over. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward, but Monica stood tall. Her presence commanded attention as she addressed the crowd. "This isn't just my victory," she said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "This is a victory for accountability, for justice, and for everyone who has ever been silenced by those in power." Benjamin stood beside her, watching with a mixture of pride and admiration as the crowd erupted into applause. Monica turned and walked away, leaving the cameras behind. Months later, Officer Simmons was dismissed from the police force and faced criminal charges for perjury and misconduct. His fellow officers, once loyal to him, distanced themselves as the investigation uncovered more of his abuses. Monica returned to her quiet life, but her name became a symbol of resilience and justice. She was invited to speak at events, her story inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Though she had left the battlefield years ago, Monica Jackson knew her fight was far from over, and she was ready for whatever came next. Because for her, justice wasn't just an outcome. It was a way of life. And just like that, the truth prevailed. A courageous woman stood her ground, exposing lies and demanding justice in a system designed to silence her. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories like this one. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Join me as we explore more tales of resilience, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.